as part of agriculture and business development policies. So we are going to hear from three experts today who are working or who have worked in the US government. We will also have two discussants from the World Bank who will share their experiences in adapting both procurement and operational policies to really incorporate this flexible modality of identifying innovations and being able to mainstream it into our own operations in a fast, transparent, and efficient way. We hope that after this hour-long webinar, we can leave with a better idea of how the US has used these instruments to stay at the frontier of innovation, and how at the bank we can continue to adapt our support to client countries on agriculture innovation to ensure that this technology divide continues to close. So I'm now really excited to present our three speakers. We will hear from all three first, and then we will open up to Q&A. We'll have each speaker speak for about 5 minutes, and then I will hand it over to our discussants for brief reactions. And also, please remember that if you are in WebEx or YouTube, you can always put your questions in the chat box and we will monitor it. And at the end of the presentations and discussions, we will ask the questions to the speakers in a structured manner. So let me briefly introduce our speakers and our discussants. So we have Natalia Olsen-Oteko, who's currently the Chief Operations Officer of the Radical Exchange Foundation and co-founder of the Disruptive Factory. Natalia is a serial entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience working with international, regional, and local entities in Latin America, Central Europe, Asia, and the US. Second speaker is Brad Rain, is currently the National Science Liaison for the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA, where he previously served as the Division Director of Agriculture Systems. Brad has a background in integrated crop and livestock farming and received his bachelor's and master's degrees in agriculture engineering with an emphasis on renewable energy from the University of Nebraska. Ken McMahon is currently the team lead for securing water for Food Grand Channel for Development, which is part of the US Global Development Lab at USAID. Ken received his MPH and PhD in environmental health at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and is an expert in science and technology policy and innovation programs that advance global prosperity, especially at the nexus of agriculture and water. Quick word on our discussants who are both from the World Bank. Kalesh, hi Kalesh. Kalesh Kumar is currently the Senior Procurement Specialist at the World Bank. Many years of experience working as a procurement specialist and holds a certificate in public procurement by the World Bank and an MBA from Jamia Millia Islamia. Parmesh Shah is currently the global lead for rural livelihoods and agricultural jobs at the World Bank and has previously worked for governments, civil society organizations, foundations, and other bilateral and multilateral development organizations in Asia and Africa. Okay, so let's get started. I'm very excited and eager to hear from our speakers, as I'm sure are all of you. So we start with Natalia or Diego. Who do we start with?
Yeah, Natalia, you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Natalia, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here with the World Bank. Exciting stuff happening. I'm an entrepreneur, but I have worked in the State Department and Department of Transportation, and then I was appointed as a presidential appointee to the U.S. Small Business Administration. So been going back and forth between government, the private sector, and it's been dynamic. It's been exciting. To be an entrepreneur is tough. So there's been many times that you have to cry and beg and get started again and keep going. So I'm going to talk a little bit about later on with my colleagues here about the SBIR, a program that is very close to my heart. It's a program of grants that goes to startups who are actually trying to solve initiatives for the 11 agencies and departments across the U.S. federal government. We have exciting programs like the SBIC, the Small Business Investment Corporation, which is funding for venture capital. That's how Silicon Valley got started. Really, when the industry went down, the government stepped up and really went and looked at the most disruptive technology and said, we're going to go ahead and match funding. We're going to go ahead and figure out how we can create areas that have been disadvantaged and bring them back. We're going to talk a little bit about the regional regional innovation clusters. There's now 56 of them in the country. There's a ton of programs that were in existence before in the Bush administration, in the Obama administration, and then in the Trump administration, there's been some great programs that they have been able to grow, like the $100 million apprenticeship program, which this administration doubled. We started with the opportunity zones, which this administration adopted. So there's a lot of great programs. It takes a village. It takes a lot of folks working together to really create an ecosystem of innovation. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes good policies, and it takes good governance and transparency. So I know we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, but I'm going to really focus on how we can create the ecosystem, how we can actually incentivize private investment to come in, and how we can leverage institutions like the World Bank and other governments to be able to help out, be able to grow their innovation ecosystems and get the economy going, because we're going to be facing a tough economic situation given this pandemic. So thank you again for having me here. We'll be looking forward to learning and to hearing what my other colleagues have been working on.
Thank you, Natalia, for keeping to the time and for your very succinct presentation. Let's move to our next speaker, who is Brad Rain. Over to you. Is Brad connected, Diego? I don't, oh, yes, I see him there.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, I did prepare a couple of quick slides. One is just basically the background on the agency I work for. I have 30 plus years of experience in both the university sector, some private experience, and some international experience, as well as overseeing grant programs for about 30 years. NIFA is a science agency, and one of the things this slide quickly shows kind of our major focus areas. We're very broad in terms of our mission area, and we actually are kind of unique in terms of science agencies in the fact that it basically just built upon our history and our predecessor agencies. We have the ability to fund research, education, and extension as individual projects or as integrated between 2 or 3 of those. So we do not directly fund internationals, but we can include international activities if we fund them to US-based organizations, really to help achieve our research, education, extension objectives that are important to US agriculture. And there's a number of those. We have a link. If you look at the bottom there, there's a link to a page that basically has a summary and brief abstracts for each year of projects we funded from about the last 3 years, just to give you an idea of how some of those collaborations work. One of the things they mentioned in terms of the interest for this group was, when you think about the role and challenges and competition, they wanted to think about the SBR, which is our Small Business Innovative Research Program. And I know Natalie is going to talk more about that, how they implement it. But one of the things we look for under that, it's a competitive grant program. It comes in 3 phases. First phase, if you're successful in the first phase and you meet the evaluation criteria and recommended for funding, you can come back and apply for the second phase, which is a little more hands-on and helpful in terms of helping launch and make those programs successful. We look for a high degree of technical risk in these programs. That's what makes them research. And of course, the potential for significant commercial impact is very important. And you can see some of the primary evaluation criteria are looking at the scientific merit, technical feasibility. Obviously, the market potential is very important. The importance of the problem, and then of course the qualifications and resources of the investigators. And I've also included, there's a lot to go in here, but just in case you're interested, a link to our phase 1 is at the bottom of this slide. If you want, we can talk more about some of this in the future and some of our discussion, but I want to go on, move quickly and get through this. Not only do you, so there's a lot of factors that go into both the selection as well as the post-award management. We fund probably something like have 60 different funding authorities, and I've been involved with a great number of those. And I just want to pull out some things that, regardless of what you're doing, really are important in terms of leading to success and transparency in what you do. And also adaptation in terms of changing what the focus areas are. One of the ways we do that is we always look for stakeholder inputs. We have multiple ways of gathering that to help our applicants who maybe not be as experienced with grant writing. We have grant writing webinars. There's a point of contact, one of our national sciences, national program leaders is the science contact to help guide you to the appropriate funding opportunity. Part of our transparency is basically peer review. We go out into the community and we get farmers, if it's a very farmer-oriented grant, we get people from non-government organizations, we get scientists, and we get industry people as well. And then we also look out for those people who basically are trying to compete against the big entities, new investigators. You need to get them starting their careers. We look at those, provide some extra leverage for some of those organizations and institutions that don't fare as well or are minority serving in aspects. We also look at, one of the things I've looked at in my experience over the years is when you're trying to do something, and this is more of an analogy, the one I'm looking at is the second bullet. When you look at trying to do something in terms of innovation in agriculture, you're going to have those that represent organizations that have the innovation technology, and then you're going to have those that represent organizations that have the agricultural expertise. You need to figure out how you bring those two together and help them work collaboratively together. One of those programs that I'd like to point to is we launched a program called Agribility years ago. It has that entity in it, and because you had nonprofit disability organizations, you had extension, very different organizational cultures. You've got to figure out how to help them work together. Look at, in the end, whether it's innovation or any other thing you're doing, you want to evaluate the quality of life and have you made improvements through the program you've launched. We've done that very effectively with this program. We got recognized on many awards for that aspect of the program. You also want to make sure you have producer participation. If you're going to work with farmers and help them innovate, you need to make sure that they are part of that decision making. And at the same time, because you're working in a large geographic, basically is sub-Saharan Africa, you need to have some regional focus, and you need to have administrative councils that help provide that. And SARE is one of our programs that does that. In terms of just looking at what you're doing in the Innovation Challenge, I was very impressed. You're basically checking all the right marks. You're using plain language, which is important. You clearly states each challenge area. You have some very common general criteria and some succinct criteria for each of your challenge. And the other thing, I think you're following up with the post-award decision-making with presentation to some of the panel experts and their feedback. And I think that's very important. I do want to close with this last slide, though, because something I've learned over the years as an engineer is that, and I've taken some courses in social science and technology studies. One of the things from the social science programs I've taken is you need to know humans matter. You really need to make sure, because we know that over all of the studies through history and anthropology and social norms, that technology influences social norms, and social norms determine what technologies will be accepted or rejected. We developed, under my initiative, a new program a few years ago on the social implications of food and agricultural technologies. I think it's very important because in the end, the social norms and the society will make a determination on which projects to go forward, technologies go forward, and which ones do not. And with that, I'm going to leave it off. I think I probably went beyond my time, but I apologize for that.
Thanks, Brad. No, you were well within your time limit. So let's hand over to our next speaker, Ku McMahon. Over to you.
Thanks. And are you all going to share the slides or should I just present my screen?
I think you can share your screen, right, Diego?
Yeah. If you can do it, it's better.
Okay, will do. All right. And so thanks everyone for joining. My name is Dr. Ku McMahon. I'm team lead of the Securing Water for Food Grand Challenge, also now the team lead for the Water and Energy for Food Grand Challenge. Securing Water for Food is a program that starts with the basic premise and spots. I'm going to zoom through here.
We're seeing your desktop, but we're not seeing your PowerPoint. I think you have to share, you have to stop sharing, and then when you share again, make sure you click on the PowerPoint.
Okay, thanks for that. Is that better? Can you see the screen now?
We
We're
can
seeing
see
a
it's
blank
gray.
screen.
A blank screen, I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's gray because I think you're not you're sharing your desktop, but you're not sharing the PowerPoint. There's an option to share
Diego,
screen.
I mean, if you have it, or you or Christina, could you project that then from your screens?
1 second. No, I don't have it. Let me see. No, I only have.
Okay. Well, I'll just talk through it quickly so we don't waste time, and then you all can just share it with folks afterwards. So Securing Water for Food is a program, a multi-donor funded initiative with Sweden through SEDA, the Foreign Ministry of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the South African Department of Science and Technology, and USAID's Global Development Lab. It was a $34 million program whose focus was how do you produce more food with less water and make more water available for food production, processing, and distribution throughout the value chain. And how do you do that through innovation? So it started with the basic premise that, traditionally donors say, we know the problem and we want these specific solutions. So put a contract in or work with an NGO to implement those solutions. Securing Water for Food flips that on its head and said, here are the 3 problems that we know we want some solutions on. Please come to us with your solutions from NGOs, from the private sector, from research universities. And so we were actually surprisingly successful. We ended up funding 40 innovators from 35 countries. And we also worked with the premise that grants alone will not help organizations scale. So we also provided business development services, investment facilitation, technical assistance, and financial funding. On the lower end awards, which we were trying to reach about 10,000 farmers, other customers or end users, they received up to $500,000 over 3 years. And for our scaling awards, they received up to $2 million over 3 years. The scaling awards were trying to reach 1 million customers and other end users versus our earlier stage innovations, which were trying to reach 10,000. Overall, we were able to reach more than 7 million farmers and their families in 4.5 years, help them produce more than 6 million tons of, 6.8 million tons of food, and help them save more than 19 billion liters of water to be more efficiently used, and another 19 billion liters of water stored. And so these are things that have now been validated by our external evaluation, and it talked about our failures and our pivots. So I just want to talk about 3 successes and 3 challenges. One is that innovation and innovative milestone-based funding mechanisms encourage innovators to grow their businesses and expand operations in a meaningful way that can kind of measure and it kind of sticks to for-profit industry standards. Capacity building and technical assistance was highly rated by innovators, especially compared to the folks we didn't fund in our external evaluation. And that our graduates and alumni developed sustainable business models with over 65% of the graduates meeting the program's expected milestones, and 2 to 3 years later, they're still in operation. Now, that doesn't happen alone, and there were still some challenges. One of them is that innovators need to have access to localized technical assistance to better understand local context and challenges. We were a global program where we were based in Washington, and our technical assistance, though we had vendors around the world, it wasn't always local, so that was a challenge. and that we need to have stronger connections to the enabling environments operating at those levels, which seems like a of course moment, but sometimes that's not always so clear. And then it's not just about giving them a grant and technical assistance. If you're planning on them being long-term successful, you have to open up and help them understand and be investment ready. And that was a challenge that we didn't do in the current program. But as a result of our external evaluation, our partners came back together about a year ago at Added Germany. And so we are doing the Water and Energy for Food Grant Challenge now, which we just launched at SOCAF last year, which is a $61 million program that we're going to build on the lessons learned from SWIFT and its sister program, Powering Agriculture, to build up this and have innovation hubs in regions, West Africa, East Africa, the MENA region, and then South and Southeast Asia, to kind of take the lessons learned from the previous program, add investment facilitation, and work in the enabling environment. So I'll pause there. A ton more I could talk about. Happy to take questions.
Great, thanks, Ku, and thanks for keeping to the time. Maybe we will just go back to get to our discussants. Thank you all. Thank you to all the speakers for really keeping to the time. So can we start with Kailesh? Maybe you can talk to the procurement issues and how we are dealing with innovations in the World Bank. Kailesh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shobha. I hope you're able to hear me.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, and see you too.
Okay, thank you. So when we think about procuring innovations, I think there are two issues which comes into my mind. First is about actually procuring innovations, whether we have a policy, regulatory environment and procedures for that. And second, bringing innovativeness in procurement methods. Now, I must say that we have been able to address the second one a lot, like bringing innovation in procurement. So we have now, integrated service solutions being procured rather than, the traditional way of procuring goods, works, and consultancy services. We have started using, criteria that we use in consultancy services, even for buying goods and equipment or technological solutions. So those ways are happening, but actually having a policy for procuring innovation is still, we are very far away. Even in the World Bank policies, we still do not have clear policies of how to bring in someone who is a startup, who is coming up with new ideas and new solutions and things like that. But what we have done so far in those areas is to follow through the procedures of ensuring efficiency, economy, transparency, and fairness. So we have this recent experience of bringing microcredit institutions, MFIs. So what we have done is we had gone through an open competitive process, but announced that these are the broad objectives. So we are not trying to get a conformance solution, announcing a predetermined terms of reference. So what we have said is, this is the coverage. We want women entrepreneurs to be promoted through microcredit institutions. Now you come up with your proposals. So we didn't ask the agencies to come up with big proposals, spending a lot of their time. We asked them to come up with concept notes. And from those concept notes, we had a policy of checking exactly similar to what Brad was alluding to, like, that small business innovation process that he has explained, that you look at the feasibility, technical feasibility and economic feasibility of the solutions. So we are not comparing apples with apples. These are everything together, but from those shortlisted 5 or 8, depending upon what is the budget that we have, we can spend in a particular year, and then engage with those shortlisted agencies on a sole source basis. So from the procurement regulatory requirement, what we did was, shaking the tree to see how many fruits are there to fall. And once we have identified technically feasible, financially feasible ideas, then work with those agencies to develop full proposals, then award them on a single source basis. So we have met the principles of transparency, which was openly announced. If fairness was met, because we have given opportunities for everyone to come, and then shortlisted and engaged directly and developed. So these techniques are applied in many places. I mean, MFIs was one of that. In urban programs, we do a lot of city development plans. Now, we cannot develop what is exactly required as the outcome of a city development plan. So we just broadly say, this is the population. These are the parameters that needs to be taken from the urban infrastructure perspective, and then ask them to come up with those solutions. So what we have done was innovate at evaluation criteria stage. So we don't say that, you should have done so many contracts of this nature. Rather than we bring in more weightage for innovative solutions they have given. Patents that these agencies hold. So patents have been becoming a major criteria in evaluation in procurement, in public sector procurement of late. Then rather than asking for giving a particular item or a particular service, ask for integrated solutions. In banking sector, core banking solutions or taxation, wherever technology is being used, we are not saying that, okay, you come write a software and then leave. We want them to give a service which is for 2 years, 3 years, and then as part of that, transfer the technology, develop the capacity and grow. So this has been the practice that bank has been doing, and there are many examples. And I must also say that, from a very rigid conformance compliance regime, now we have moved to a performance-based system. So it's results and performance, and there are possibilities within the procurement framework that bank has announced in 2016, where these kind of innovations can be done. There are many examples. I mean, I can tell you, even in right now, I work in Afghanistan. So, as an economic relief response project, we are trying to bring together wholesalers and retailers for a food distribution project, because we know that you cannot run a competition and select 2 or 3 people to come and give the solution. When you have unprecedented demand of mobilizing commodities, you need to bring everyone together. So those are the kind of solutions, and there is scope and there is possibilities for running these kind of things within the procurement framework. There are many countries that are trying it. In the European Union and OECD countries, there are 38 countries which have written policies for procuring innovation. So slowly we will be adapting and we'll be moving towards that. And the procurement family has always found agriculture colleagues very open for such innovation, and we are always there to work with you. And it was excellent points that our presenters have given. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kailesh. And I'm really happy to hear that our 2016 procurement framework actually will be, is very conducive to promoting this procurement of innovation. And I think what you have said also is very much in line with what our previous speaker, Ku, had also mentioned about. This is not just about the grant, but it's also about providing the technical assistance and making sure they are investment ready. So it's good to see those connections being made, and how we are doing that, not just in the agriculture sector, but also with MFIs in our urban programs and so on. So thanks very much for that, and I'll hand it over to our next discussant, Parmesh, who's our global lead on rural livelihoods and jobs at the World Bank. Parmesh, over to you. We can't hear you, Parmesh. Are you muted? I cannot hear Parmesh. I'm not sure if I can. Parmesh, you may be muted. I think you are muted, so. We can see your slides, but we can't hear you.
Okay, somehow I'm...
Yeah, it's fine now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I will not show the slide because I somehow am, when I show the slide, I get muted. So I don't know how the technology works, but I think I like all the presentations. I think clearly the three takeaways we have, which resonates with us, is that we shouldn't look at this as a very transactional issue. Getting innovators is an ecosystem investment issue. And unless and until our projects are investing in an innovation ecosystem, what you call it, you cannot sort of, start doing this transaction by transaction. So moving from an episodical kind of a approach in which we have an event and then we are obsessed with the event and then we do something with the event and then we don't have something to follow that. So finance is just one part of it and the challenge is one part of it. As Brett described, I think the mentorship, the incubation, and creating a platform is, I think, more critical in order for this to sustain for a longer time. And that's what we had in Kenya, is that we had a longish period of incubation with an incubator, local incubator, which I think is also critical, which I think we were talking about. Just having someone parachuting from somewhere won't work. You need a country based. So in Kenya, we had a very good incubator, which was mentoring and coaching them to help them do that, and then creating a platform in which we have now Microsoft offering free Azure credits to all our startups, basically, and helping them develop the enterprise management part of it. So Microsoft has adopted our platform as where they will do a lot of proof of concept on how they will roll out their enterprise platforms with startups. Then we have Rabobank really coming in as a financial partner, where they are looking at how they will scale up the business models. And then we have the government with its, Calro, which is our big data platform agency, looking at how they will make this data accessible to innovators so they can not spend too much time on collecting data and do products and services. So I think creating an enabling ecosystem and fitting a challenge within that is very, very important. I'm sort of very interested in sort of learning about what Natalie was telling earlier to us about how they have ensured that all the procurement which is done by US government has built in women businesses as an integral part of procurement. They procure a lot of services from women businesses itself. So I think we have to also develop something of a more kind of an affirmative kind of policy on procurement, where we work with certain section of startups and innovators as an integral part of our procurement to do that. And as Kalesh said rightly, that if we have a policy of sourcing innovation, then we are not dealing with individual procurement specialists. So Kalesh, I still will say there's an exception in the bank. He's among the 10% of the procurement people who really will pick up a good idea and run with it. We don't have an enabling kind of policy which will allow for us to look at that. So my takeaway is that we definitely need to learn from these three examples and do something institutional, as opposed to just doing a challenge and then spending a lot of time on challenging and fizzling out when it comes to finally converting that to scale. So I'll stop there, but we need to continue to learn from the three presenters on how we can take this to scale. Our aspiration in agriculture food GP is to run a big innovation challenge on COVID and food in the next 6 months. So because there is plethora of innovations happening, but we have no way by which our teams can source those innovations and then start working on it there. So we are trying to work with Gates and Rockefeller and other agencies now to develop that platform so that we can use all our projects then can harvest from that platform, and they don't have to do it one by one in each country. And we will come back to the three presenters to take their ideas on how we can do that. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Padmesh. Yes, I think you were spot on about your point about that. This is, it's an ecosystem, so we need these reforms at the institutional level to be able to really scale up and make this sustainable. So we've received a lot of questions for our speakers, and I'm trying to organize this, but some of them are to specific speakers, but others are probably I'll have all three speakers speak to it. So let me start with a few of these questions. What is the impact of including a monetary reward in a challenge versus not having a monetary reward? And is there any ideal size of the reward? So that's one. And then let's go to the second one about success in organizing these challenges and grant competitions. How do you measure success in a challenge competition, and what has not been successful in the organization of challenges or grant competitions in the US? So let's start with these couple of questions. So
Sure.
Natalia, do you want to go first, and then we can have Ku and Brad come in?
Absolutely. So great question. I'll do the first one because sometimes capital is not everything. We need to really do is to be able to build capacity and pilots. Or one of my favorite programs in the U.S. government, which we increased, was during the Jobs Act. We said 23% of everything the U.S. government buys has to come from small businesses. And then we increased within that 23%, 5% of everything the U.S. government buys has to come from women-owned companies. That's $500 billion that the U.S. government buys per year. And so if you look at the statistics, if you look at the numbers, that means that $10 billion of whatever the government buys, services, products, consulting, has to go to a women-owned company. That in itself proves to be a catalyst. It doesn't cost the government much money. The entrepreneur, the business owner, all they want is an opportunity to have a client that pays, that will actually help them build. And so within that program, we have the 8A program that is managed by the SBA. And it's a 9-year program where if you're a minority-owned company, a veteran-owned company, if you live in an area of disadvantage or women-owned company, then you can actually take advantage and position yourself by receiving counseling, technical advice. There's also policies within that says we can only, if it's a smaller project, it has to go directly to a woman-owned company or a disadvantaged company. So there's policy. Sometimes we, as government folks, we say we're going to do these big things. Well, really using institution, using the government as a catalyst to be able to give that is huge. In many countries in the EU, they just started doing this, but it's like 2% or 3%, and they're trying to work to do this. But if we can really leverage that, that has tremendous potential.
Great, thanks, Natalia. On the success, how do you measure success in a challenge competition? I guess maybe if Ku or Brad want to take on the other questions about the challenge itself and how how do you measure the success and what has not been successful in the organization of these challenges in the US?
Sure. So I guess I'll start. I think how you measure success depends upon your objectives. It also depends upon the stage of innovation at which you're trying to reach out. So you can go early stage innovation, which is early stage research. Then you can go mid stage, which is applied research. And then you can go late stage, where you're going beyond application, beyond what I consider pilotitis, and trying to move to wide scale adoption. So depending upon which stage of innovation you're going at, you're going to measure it differently. At the early stage, where you've already heard the number of patents that are coming out, the number of additional research grants, the amount of research funding that they're being able to get as follow-ons. At early stage post-pilot, then you're looking at the number of people who've started to use it. But the one thing I think that is extremely important for the bank and everyone to understand is that often in these programs, we've had a supply side driven process where the innovators, the researchers are saying, here's my new tool, here's my new approach, where in fact, it needs to be the opposite. It needs to be demand driven, that it needs to be a pull mechanism rather than a push. And often when we're measuring the success of these programs, that's the thing where we're not seeing. And that's why many innovations often fail, and many innovation programs often fail, is because they focus on the pull and not the push, right? I said that back. They focus on the push and not the pull. And so you really want to make sure from the ground, there's actually a demand and a need for the innovation. And then say, all right, now how can we meet that need? And often, we're the other way around. We say, oh, come and give us your cool innovations. These are game changing. But we don't put in the processes and the techniques to get us there with the people on the ground. And somebody said it earlier, I think it was Brad, about it's the human that matters. And so consumer-driven demand is where we should be focusing innovation programming. Because especially with farming, because farmers are often very adverse to trying new technologies and innovations. They often have to see it amongst their compatriots, have to see it be used for 2 or 3 years. And then when they say, oh, that actually works, I'll try that. And we funded everything from drones to digital innovation technologies to IoT technologies to ag adjuvants. So we funded all kinds of things. And I think that's a consistent piece when we've sent our external evaluators out to talk to farmers in the field about what works and what doesn't, and will they keep using it. That's the key piece that matters, that often is kind of lost on our side at the policy level when we're talking about innovation.
Great, thanks, Ku. Brad, do you want to weigh in on this, or shall we move to the next set of questions? Okay, let me move on to the next set of questions. What is the difference between an SBIR and a challenge? And another question on working with the US government. Could you please expand how, if working with the US government has an impact on intellectual property rights? And let's take one more. The role of venture capital, angel investors in a challenge, within the structure of a challenge. So the three of them: IPR with the US government, venture capital and angel investors within the structure of a challenge, and a specific question on what is the difference between an SBIR and a challenge.
If I may, so the SBIR actually owns a part of your intellectual property. The challenges don't. And it's the SBIR is 3 phases. You start with a concept, an idea. It ranges between $100,000 and $150,000. Then second and third phase goes up to $2 million. The challenges are a one-time award, or it can be a pilot opportunity, or it can be recognition, or small, like I said, small amounts of money. So the IP is a part that plays into this. That's what my understanding. Brad?
Sure, and from the US AID side, we hold an unrestricted license on any of the things that we fund. So if it's some sort of technology or innovation, however, we often will not use that license. We give that back to the innovator who's working with us so that they can go out and spread the technology. If it is ever the case, and it never has been as far as I know, where an innovator said, nope, I don't want to push this anymore, but it's an amazing technology, we would then have the option to go spread it around the world, but we've never used that.
Yeah. I would, that's correct. We don't do a lot of challenge grants in NIFA. We do them at the USDA level, and there's a couple of those out there right now that are being formulated. But SBIR is exactly as Natalie described it. That's how the intellectual property rights work. We do have some programs that if there is intellectual property that they've already have, obviously they need to protect that, and our funding mechanism and how we solicit that information and guaranteeing confidentiality will be cognizant of that and respectful of their intellectual property. So.
Okay, thanks, Go. Anyone want to take the question on the angel investors and venture capital, and how does that play a role in the structure of a challenge, if any?
Sure. And so, because we're doing this in the new program, Water and Energy for Food. So our viewpoint is that government funding alone is not going to be enough to solve any of these challenges, especially in developing country contexts. And you, one, have to have angel investors. You have to have local investors who understand the local context, who can come in and sometimes provide just money, sometimes money plus advice, and sometimes they'll partner up. And so our biggest challenge we've seen is, unless they are very local, especially in agriculture, many investors don't understand the ag innovation space. And so there's a lot of risk there. So they are a little bit hesitant, if not averse, to taking on that risk alone, unless they have either a partner or some external validator who's kind of checked the innovation and make sure it works. But we do see a strong place for this. We've seen a lot of US companies, larger companies, who will have as part of their IPR and IT processes to bring in some of these, the Dows, the DuPonts of the world, who are bringing in ag innovations into their value chains. Similarly, we're seeing, innovator startups who are kind of starting their own small companies and businesses, who then are getting that additional support once they've been validated by the SBIRs and the challenges of the world to then move forward.
Great. Thanks for those very good responses. I'm trying to keep track of all of the questions and make sure that I cover all of them. Okay, so I guess, again, back to our speakers, and then I have a couple of questions for Kailesh on specific issues relating to procurement and how we do this better in World Bank operations. So I think there's a specific question for Dr. Ko. What are the 3 key suggestions you would give to a challenge organizer? Second, given the COVID crisis we're going through right now, how is the US government responding to it in terms of the continuous promotion of innovation? Have you been successful in the creation of regional hubs? And what would be your advice on doing that? So let's have these questions to the speakers, and then I have some specific questions on for Kailesh and on the procurement side of things. So the 3 questions are, one specifically, Dr. Ko, about the 3 key suggestions you would give to a challenge organizer. And then we have the, how does the US government, in the face of this current COVID crisis, how is it responding in terms of the continuous promotion of innovation and the creation of regional hubs?
Okay, great. So I'd say, and I actually, if you all are able to share the slide deck, but if not, you can go to securingwaterforfood.org, and there is our final report. And so there's a bunch of, we have a whole 30-page section on suggestions and lessons learned for Ag Challenge Fund program. So I won't be able to cover everything, but the 3 key ones I think are know your North Star. And by that, I mean, what is the key objective you're trying to reach? And you should be every few months going back and looking at that and have measurable ways in which you're going to see how you're reaching that key objective. For us, it was, are we helping farmers produce more food with less water? And so we had to send people out to the field to understand that. The second one is, one of our key lessons learned is make sure that money alone is not going to solve the problem, and make sure the amount of capital you're giving out is appropriate for the level of technology and the stage of innovation. That we found in our evaluation and talking to investors, and in some cases we were crowding out their funding because our amounts were a little too big. And so by the time innovators got to the point where they were ready for investment, they hadn't done some of the key steps that they needed to because they'd already had that $500,000 from us per se. And so we have to dial back the amount of money we're giving. And the third most important one is local context really matters. And so if you're not working within the local enabling environment, you're not going to prepare yourself for the types of success you potentially could see. And when we shifted the program, one, to not just, innovators from anywhere, but from a country for a country, and also the technical assistance to be more local, our rates of success really shot up. And that's how we reached those key pieces. So, but I've got in the slide deck about 6 or 7 lessons learned where we failed, what the challenge was, and how we pivoted to then achieve that lesson learned. So I'll pause there for the other.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Yes, go ahead.
On the regional innovation business clusters, this was challenging because we had to, a lot of counties and cities or cross state regions, sometimes they didn't participate together. We have, a lot of division of funds between the school district or the business district and so on. But what we did, which actually was successful, was to actually, go down there, be local, let's how we were going to be competitive globally, which is key. It took a lot, to hands-on, very hands-on, a lot of the stakeholders. It has to be you have to have corporations, and you have to have the innovators, and you have to have the entrepreneurs, and you have to have the local policy and the civic tech folks. I can give you a slew of success stories we have 56 of them across the US. The number of small businesses cluster participants increased over 500% during the first years, which is amazing. Actually, within the 3rd year of the program, the initiative totaled about 3.9 billion in economic activity, and and folks are actually making 4 times more money in those particular clusters. So we have to have metrics. We have to have transparency for us to be able to say, okay, this is how we need to come back to Congress or to your financial folks or investors to say, hey, this program has been successful, but here are the metrics, here's where the money went, and this is how many jobs were created, and these how many better jobs will be coming in the future, and so on.
So the only thing I can probably add to that is one of the things in terms of responding to COVID-19, we actually have a special RFA we put out very quickly in response to COVID-19 and requesting grants under a various number of topics. And but the other thing we do on a regular is we were always structured to do virtual panels. We did that a few years ago. I actually led that 20 years ago with the first virtual panel. So we're capable of doing that. But I think in terms of making sure you have that post-award management, we have project director meetings where under a certain area, all the project directors funded will come and report out their findings and how they're progressing, and we'll take a look at those, and they share their ideas. So then that builds collaborations for future projects. We also have another mechanism called multi-state committees. There's nearly 200 of those that we support across the country on all aspects of emerging issues. And that actually serves as a great incubator to bring people from different organizations together to focus on how do you solve problems. And then they can also apply for funding when they develop those collaborative efforts. And then we also do conference grants to look at how, what is the new emerging issues. One was our Future in Agricultural Cyber Informatic Tools. We did a number of those before we really launched a major funding opportunity. So I can go on, but I think that's probably enough to try and absorb in this period of time. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Brad. So we have 5 minutes to go. So let's maybe take a couple more questions. And maybe this is, more to discussants, really, on how what are the challenges that the World Bank has seen over the years in terms of leveraging public-private partnerships and really sort of trying to convince governments, because I think there's a lot of mistrust, between the private sector and the public sector in many of the countries that we work in. So how do we sort of really sort of address this, and how do we leverage this better? So maybe Kailesh and Parmesh, if you have maybe a minute to talk about this, that would be great. And then also a specific question on the procurement about, the 2 aspects on the technical, wherein you could use the innovation criteria, and financial, which adopts through the low-cost approach. And this question is to Kailesh. So how do you deal with both these aspects when you're running these kinds of challenges? And then maybe the final question, to our speakers, really, I know Natalia talked about the, setting aside the 5% for women-owned small businesses from U.S. procurement, but have there also been ways in which you could scale up the percentage of women-owned, women-led sort of the participants in these challenge competitions, and what suggestions would you have for us in the World Bank and others who are in this call? So let me start with our discussants and then go to our speakers for final thoughts on how to encourage more women and women-owned businesses. Kailesh and Parmesh, maybe a minute each from you, and then we conclude with our speakers.
Thank you, Shobha. Let me take the question on the procurement one. Price L1 concept is no more applied even in many of the government procurement. So what we have done is you change that price to value. So when you make it a value evaluation, so lowest price is not just the only factor. You can add other factors like life cycle costing, value engineering. So there are many ways to do it. There are competitive dialogue as a method being used, best and final offer being taken. Now the issue is at what value we will try to do these complicated procedures and methods. So if it is low value, then simple, straightforward process and procurement methods are used. That's my answer. On PPP one, particularly in agriculture, I think Parmesh will be able to answer better on that particular issue. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kailesh. Parmesh?
Yeah, I think so. I think the issue is clearly that you need to bring government on board on what problem we are trying to solve and how. That's what we've done in Kenya. We brought in the whole government, senior leadership, as well as all the county governors, all on a platform, agree on the challenges. Once they agree on the challenge, we facilitate a lot of informal interaction through a human-centered design approach, which Brad was talking about, between these people. And once that agreement comes in, then I think challenge and everything becomes easier to do after that. So I think that's something which is very, very important to do, because we rush into public-private partnership in a very contractual transaction way from day one. And then they start looking at this as a contract as opposed to really in a partnership kind of a model. So kind of pre-enabling kind of investment in building that multi-stakeholder kind of agreement is very critical to build the ecosystem there. And also, I think after that, it is very important that whatever you have as the early successes and reports are shared continuously. So I think what happens is that we bring all the innovators with the public decision makers very periodically together, and that really creates a very different trust relationship between. I think you can, if you invest in that processes and the capacity all, then you can create a system by which the trust is built, by which the transactions will become very normal. Otherwise, if you do transactions without building that enablers, then transactions are always based on mistrust and all, because they don't know those people, they have not seen how they're performing. And so we have to create conditions for them to perform on a very small scale and interact and then build those enablers there. That's the kind of short of it. Don't go into public-private partnerships as the panacea. Build the ecosystems to make that happen. See, challenge then everyone. And in the jury, we bring all the government guys to become part of jury. And another thing we have done is that we have not restricted to just the private innovators. We have brought in and sourced innovators within the government also. So it's a combination of public innovators and private innovators also coming together. And then the resistance goes down because you mix the public and private innovators together. And that's why the government is not resistant towards it, because they're also public sector innovators within the research system are also recognized because they never had an opportunity to participate in a challenge before that. So we have found that mixing the two reduces resistance completely on that point. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I think we've run out of time. So I would like to thank our speakers again for very stimulating and informative discussions. And I'm sure many of our colleagues will be reaching out to you to follow up on issues that we haven't been able to discuss today due to lack of time. Natalia, Brad, Ku, really very much appreciate your sharing your time with us today. We've learned a lot. And our discussants, Kailesh and Parmesh, thank you so much. And thanks, Diego, for organizing this, and very happy to have been part of this. Thank you all. And I will end here. Diego, is there anything that you want to add before we conclude?
No, that we will circulate the PowerPoints. Apologies for the last one that we couldn't share while the speaker was talking, but for those in YouTube, if you want to send us your email, we can also share those with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you to all the participants and for all your great questions. Thank you all. Stay safe and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.